Hello, my name is Niall Scally, and I have prepared this YouTube video in conjunction with a radio interview that I did with the Midlands Radio 3. And let me just say that for 30 years I've had the privilege to be a public speaker, and anytime it's ever been videoed, it's been by a professional. Well, I'm not a professional video person. This is not going to be some fancy presentation. I will not be using any psychological tricks, any speaking skills. I will not be using any software type of skills, because if what I have to say, the injustice that I have to point out to you, doesn't get your attention, then nothing else actually would. I was invited onto the radio show to address an issue that I have been working on for the last 2 years. When I returned home from America after 30 years to my homeland here, I questioned why it is that the Irish government, the RSA in particular, refuses to accept the driver's license of an Irish American citizen. And not just why it is that they refuse to accept it, but what it is that they put us through. So for an Irish American like myself, or my children, or any Irish American, or any American in that particular, doesn't matter. What I have to do when I came home was, the Irish government said to me, was that I have to take a theory test. Despite the fact that I'm 51 and have been driving in Ireland for 30-something years, coming back and forth, that I have to take a theory test and get my learner's permit, which is essentially worthless because I can't drive on my own and I can't drive on any of the motorways, so I can't go to work. It's no good. But I have to take the test anyway. I have to pay for it. And then I have to take 12 lessons and pay for those and have the cost associated with that. And then I have to book and wait an ungodly, insane amount of time to be able to sit down and take my driving test. Now, all that takes about 8 months, maybe to a year even. And it's a considerable amount of expense. And I questioned, why is it that an Irish American has to go through all that, when at the same time, if you are from Japan and you want to come to this country and you would like to get the same privilege that an Irish person like myself has to do, what does the Japanese person have to do? Well, I'm going to list what it is that the Japanese person, the requirements that are imposed on the Japanese person. And here they are. Are you ready for them? No, there's nothing wrong with your computer or your phone or your TV, because the requirements imposed on them are none. The Irish government, unbelievably, will exchange the Japanese license. No requirements, no theory test, no lessons, no driving test. And for how much, in comparison to how much I have to spend, or any Irish American or American has to spend, how much did they charge the Japanese person? €13. €13. No more effort and no more expense than walking into the shop and buying a bag of spuds. A Japanese person. Now, I said something on the radio that probably shocked a few people. And what I said was, I believe wholeheartedly that any government entity or official in this country who has implemented a law that creates such a stumbling block that hinders an Irish American from coming back into their own country, anyone who has played a role in instituting a law that makes it so difficult for an Irish person, then I said, I believe you have lost your right to sing the national anthem. You have forfeited your right to sing the national anthem. When you make it such an arduous task for an Irish American to return home, you have no right to sing the national anthem. Why? Because you're a hypocrite. Because the national anthem of this country, Our An Naveen, is when you sing it, you sing, celebrate, and recognize the role that the Irish Americans have played in this country's independence. Yes, every time you sing the national anthem, and I guess we have a bunch of leaders and they're unaware. It's great that our national anthem is in Gaelic, but I guess the leaders of this country are unaware that when you sing it, we are celebrating our connection with the Irish American. We're honoring them. But when we institute laws like that, that's hypocrisy. Not only is it hypocrisy, when you make it easier for someone from Japan, no, I have nothing against someone from Japan, but think about the logic. A Japanese person most likely cannot read English. Their language is a tonal language. They don't have an alphabet. They use characters. So there's a high probability that that Japanese person, who's never driven on the roads in Ireland, doesn't matter whether they have or not, they've never driven on the roads in Ireland, and it's highly probable they cannot read any writing that's on our signs. And I cannot fathom the logic that the Irish government just completely accepted. But that's not just the insult. And apart from the fact, like one of the things I tried to do with the RSA was I tried to explain that the law is insane for other reasons. Like it's insane because insane and illogical not only that, it's detrimental to the environment. This law is detrimental to the environment and to the economy of the Irish people. I mean, here I am, a ready, willing, and able Irish person to go to work in this country, and the government would rather give me welfare than a driver's license. Now, when you are in a country where you have an individual that's ready, willing, and able to work, and they can't as a result of a rule like this, then you're in a country that's underperforming. Now, that's just a part of it. But what I really want to point out, the reason I believe you forfeit your right to sing the national anthem is you have forgotten the very people who came to your aid, both for the War of Independence, but go back and read your history and what America did for Ireland during the famine. Not just the Irish Americans, but Americans. Look at one woman, Anisette Hatch Nicholson, from Vermont, no heritable ties at all to Ireland, was responsible because she wrote and highlighted the suffering and starvation that which has never appeared on such a scale in the world before. She highlighted that, and when she put her pen to paper, her ink ignited the conscience of a whole nation. And they got together and sent relief and saved the lives of millions of people. And somehow or another we've seemed to have forgotten that. Now, not only do we celebrate the Irish American in our national anthem, do you remember, who doesn't remember, 1916 Rising, right? April the 24th, 1916, 12:45, our famous forefather, Padraig Pearse, stood outside the GPO and he read the Irish Proclamation. You remember the provisional government of the Irish Republic, okay? And he read this. Now, I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to read what is pertinent to my point here. Here's what he said. He said, "To the people of Ireland, Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland through us summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Having organized and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organization, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organizations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army, having patiently perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment, and get this, and supported by her exiled children in America, our forefathers sought to recognize the role that the Irish American played in our independence, so much that they would forever be on our national treasured documents and in our national anthem. And this law is a spit in the face to the ancestors of those people. Can you imagine the children of the people that we sing about in the national anthem? Can you imagine the children of the people that Padraig Pearse was mentioning in the proclamation? Can you imagine their children coming to this country and being told that a Japanese person has considerably more privileges and priority over theirs? That's an insult. And that's the reason I believe that when you put a foreign nation When you make them a priority over your own people, then you're guilty of treason. You have betrayed your own people. I urge anyone who is responsible for this law, go home and look up the definition of a traitor. Go home and write it down and memorize it. And maybe when you go to work every day, pull it out and take a look at it. And maybe when you start making rules and regulations, policies and procedures, you might actually remember who it is that you swore to serve. Now, what is so sad, that this law is just a microcosm of what I have experienced over the last 3 years, and that is that our Irish government seems to be they're so much more concerned about every other nation except their own. And I just cannot fathom that. Now, back to the fact that we've forgotten the role that the Irish American played in the saving of millions of lives in the famine and in our War of Independence. When I went to America, Mary Robinson, the president, an inspirational woman, came to America in 1995. And she did so to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the famine. And she went to America because she was there to recognize their contribution as to what I'm speaking of, what America did for Ireland during its worst crises in its history, and there to celebrate. And she made a comment as she gave a speech, which is, if you get a chance to look at it, to the Chicago Club. It's an inspirational speech. But she said this in the speech. She said, commemoration is a moral act. Commemoration is a moral act. Now, I have come to the realization that we have a government and they don't know the definition of what commemoration means. And so let me remind them. Commemoration is to remember, or is to remind the present and future generations to keep alive a memory of something that someone has done, to show appreciation, to show gratitude, to acknowledge their role in your success, to remember them. Just look at the word commemorate. Inside, in the very center, you'll see memor. That comes directly from the Latin word, which means to keep in mind. Okay, to keep. Did the people responsible for instituting this driver's license law, did they keep in mind, did they remember the contribution that the Irish American has played in this country? I doubt it. I doubt it. And let me just say this. I'm a lover, it used to drive my kids mad, but I'm a lover of etymology. I'm a lover of linguistics, the history of words and phrases and where they came from. And I find an incredible sense of irony, even embarrassment, that the phrase, eaten bread is soon forgotten. That phrase, eaten bread is soon forgotten, I'm sure you've heard it. That phrase can directly be traced right back to our Gaelic language. We came up with that. We came up with that. And I asked the question, how hypocritical is it for us to indirectly impose a moral standard on the rest of the world with that phrase when we are so grossly guilty of violating it ourselves? You know, the law makes it look like, to the Irish American, to the American, it looks like we're an ungrateful people. It looks like we have no loyalty, we have no backbone, we have no honor. That we don't honor, like what we say and how we appreciate is not consistent with the rules and laws that we pass. That's total hypocrisy. And I think it's very strong that Mary Robinson said that it's a moral act, that it's a moral obligation for us. This is not just a legal matter, Mary Robinson said, the President of Ireland. She said to remember what the Irish Americans did, the Americans, that is a moral obligation. Now, I said this is not a fancy video, so I'm going to take my time, and if I have to pause or read or something, I'm going to do that. It's not considered the most professional thing to do, but I'm so sick of the government of Ireland. As I've been home, the exorbitant amount of money that they charge the Irish people, not just Irish Americans now, the exorbitant amount of money that the Irish government, the RSA, charges its own people to drive on their own roads. Now, I want to remind you of something. The roads that you drive on to work every day, the roads that are outside my house right here, those roads are Irish. Those roads belong to the Irish people. The roads in this country that you are being charged these exorbitant fees to drive on, they're your roads. And if you're in the RSA and the Irish government or a political leader in this country, let me tell you something. These roads are not the roads of the Irish government. The RSA does not own these roads. These roads are the people of Ireland's road. This is our land. Before you get to charging us any more money, this land belongs to us. And it reminds me, do you remember the last time that somebody came into this country and charged us rent to use our own land? You know what we did? We drove them out of the country. And I urge every politician to be very, very careful and to remember that. Okay, I remember the famous movie The Field, and the Bull McCabe, with the injustice that was potentially about to take place. The famous Bull is standing outside the gates of the chapel, and he's shouting, and he reminds the priest of how they abandoned their own people during the famine, and all those times nobody starved. No priest starved at that time. But one of my favorite scenes is when he's standing inside the house, at the priest's house, and the priest suggests that he find another field. He spent his entire life working this field, but the priest suggests just find another field. And of course the bull is disgusted, right? Absolutely disgusted with the whole idea that maybe he should find another field. And the priest said, the field belongs to the widow bull, and she's entitled to sell it. And the priest says to the bull, he said, "Bull, that's the law, the common law." And do you remember what the Bull McCabe said? He leans in with brilliant acting, but not just the acting, it's the attitude. It's the Irish attitude. It's where we get our reputation for being the fightish Irish. He leans in to the priest as he sits in the chair, and he said, "There's a law, all right. There's a law, all right," he said, "and it's stronger than the common law." He said, "and that's the law of the land." And I'll never forget his final words. And he said to that priest, he said, "No collar and no uniform and no weapon would stand in the way of him getting justice." Where has that fighting spirit gone? Why have we allowed the Irish government to take what is rightfully ours? Now, I want to ask you something, and I've mentioned it before, about how an ancestor of the people that's mentioned in the proclamation and the anthem, how they would feel about this whole idea. As I've lived in America for almost 3 decades, do you know how many homes that I've been to that Americans who really, they try and find a way to have a connection with this country. I've been to homes with people who actually have no relatives here, and they're decorated with Irish memorabilia, flags and plaques and the proclamation and everything. They're so honored to try to be associated with this country. I would be embarrassed to tell them that this country actually has turned their back on them. That is essentially what's happened. The law displays such ignorance and illiteracy of the history between our two countries. Let me ask you this question. Did Michael Collins, Bobby Sands, or Gary Owen, did all those great men and women of Ireland spill their blood and guts across the fields of this country for the Japanese, for the Ukrainians, for the Polish? I've nothing against any of those groups. how they must turn in their grave when they realize the people they fought and gave their lives for in the country are second-class citizens. Can I ask you, when did that happen? When did we become second-class citizens in our own country? You know, I find it funny, as I've traveled around the world, people have asked me, what kind of a political system does Ireland have? You know what I want to tell them now? I want to tell you Ireland has a new political system. And it's run by a bunch of professional political pickpockets. That's what we have as a political system now, professional political pickpockets. And those professional political pickpockets, they get to choose entities like the RSA, and they're the quintessential kleptomaniac. Kleptomaniacs personified, always trying to take money from the Irish people, dreaming up ways. And then they don't represent us. I mean, they take our money and give it to foreign nationals. Is that not betrayal? I remember when I went to America, and in college I was studying American history. The war cry of the Revolutionary War was this: no taxation without representation. The American people finally got sick and tired of giving their hard-earned money to a government who didn't care about them. And they finally rose up. That is what caused the Revolutionary War in America. Now, I'm not suggesting, I'm not for violence at all. I don't want a revolution, but I expect outrage. That's for sure. I expect you to sit down with your pen and write to your politician and remind them that this country is your country. Remind them that they swore to serve you. I'm all for assisting other nations and refugees and everything, but the way this country has gone is absolutely. I do not have to actually wax on about that. I know if you're Irish and you're living in this country, you know what I'm talking about. But let me ask you. I hear people all the time talking about, our rights. Where are the rights of the Irish people in their own country? I'm going to tell you where they are. You know where your rights are? Right at the back of the line. Right at the bottom rung of the ladder. That's where the rights of the Irish person is. I mean all those great heroes of Ireland that we celebrate and we write poetry about and we sing our rebel songs about. How disgusted they must be that we took this country from a group of people only to hand it over to a government who are worse than the people we fought and died to get rid of. And they fought and died. When I think about Michael Collins and those great men, they wanted Irish people to echo the sentiment of Martin Luther King. That's what they died for. They wanted every Irish person to be able to say, free at last, thank God Almighty, free at last. That was their goal. But, we have what I thought, our Constitution, a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. But what people? Look around and ask yourself with the rules and regulations and where our money is going, and surely to God you have to ask yourself, maybe the government must be confused about what people they are serving. And so while this might seem like the law, it might seem like the whole driver's license issue, that Ireland's and rejecting the United States of America's driver's license, which essentially only affects Irish Americans, it might seem like a small potatoes, but this seems to be a very consistent and disturbing direction that this government is going. And I'm just asking you to remind your political leaders that they shouldn't be singing the national anthem of this country, and they shouldn't be celebrating our treasured national documents if they are going to put other nations ahead of us, if they're going to give a priority and more privileges to nations that never did anything for this country, then I urge you to get down and to remind your counselor. I urge you to send him this video. I actually have, I'm going to go back to America. I have nothing to gain from this, but we are famous all over the world for being defiant. As the Fighting Irish, we are defiant and famous all over the world for standing up for injustice. And it is time, folks. It's time that you stand up for your rights. Now, from my vantage point, I see an awful injustice all around me. There's an old Native American Indian story, and I'll leave you with this. Here's how I see it from my vantage point. There's a young boy, and he lives in an Indian tribe, and they live in a valley. And all his life he has lived in that valley. And he comes of age, and he decides that he's going to leave. So it's his first time to leave the valley. And as he climbs to the pinnacle of the mountain, he decides to take one more look back down. And he looks back down into the valley, and he's never actually seen his village in its entirety. He's never actually seen the whole picture until he left. And that's how it feels for me. I never realized until I left what this country has become, what it's like, especially that I've come back. So thanks for taking the time to listen, and I hope that you will support the cause that I'm trying to insist on. I hope you'll look for your rights. I'm hoping for reform on this particular law. I'm hoping that somebody actually will study the history of this country and start to make decisions that put the Irish people first. Thank you.